Good morning, everyone. I'm sure you all had a very great session with Naveen and so many lessons to take away for the citizen science initiatives that you may be doing or may plan to take up. So today we have the morning talks. We have three speakers for today. And the first one today we have with Paul Pop. So welcoming all of you to this session, some more interesting talks for the day. We have Paul, who has been, just to give me a minute. Okay, Paul. So Paul is currently working as Junior Research Fellow under the project High Resolution Spatial Mapping of Bird Phenology as an indicator of ecosystems health in relationship to climate change in Himalayas under the Government College of in Bilaspur. He has previously worked for critically endangered Himalayan quail and for organizations like CUBE and SECON. He is also an avid contributor at citizen science platforms like eBird, iNaturalist, and India Biodiversity Portal. So Paul, he will take the floor now. And if you have a question, do mark it in the thread to Paul Pop itself, and so that the questions are answered at the end of his talk. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah. You can start playing. Hello, my name is Paul, and we are giving a presentation on the use of citizen science data for the study and conservation of threatened and endemic avian species. So why do we need these studies? We need the studies because endemic species have range restricted range. Means in the case of disaster or data-rich habitat, they are more likely to go extinct and more faster to go extinct compared to other species. When it comes to Monte Sinclair and Shoalaka, which we'll be discussing today, there's a lot of knowledge gaps and there's a lot of data deficiency for the two endemic species of this species complex due to the recent split, which was in 2017. And we're also looking at a species called Opisciacus furiosa, which is Himalayan quail, and they're critically endangered as per IUCN. So this is how the project started as an occupancy in the two species. I chose Monte Sinclair paramangi and Shoalaka albuensis, which is found in the southern Western Ghats, and most of them can be found in the half of the population probably. And I focus in Devapur because they are within, much of their habitat lies within this taluk. So we're looking at different regions where I did the study. So zooming out, we're starting to see a structure, right, of an elevational gradient, and this thing grows to become an sky island, which is elevationally isolated from other regions. And these were the results of the study, and found that elevation was very correlated. It's very significant variable covariate when it comes to deciding the occupancy of the species. Similarly, there are other covariates. Then, before starting talking about the use of citizen science data or community science data, I prefer to call it. Let's look at the disadvantages. One of them is the birding bias. Look at the landscape. This is the colony anomaly region. You can see that there are different clusters. One cluster is Munnar and another cluster is Kodaikanal. What is similar in both of the cases is that they are tourist spots, and there are more birders coming to these regions compared to other regions. And that's why you have empty spots in the middle. So this is birding bias. Now we look at the habitat preference with the help of a high resolution land cover classification, which is around 15 meters per clear resolution. So when we put the data for each of the species, species coordinate points in the data sets, we find that a lot of them are falling within the evergreen forest and plantations, both species. And if you compare it region wise, we get this these 9 graphs were in Dikulam. We can combine them, and this is the sampling event for data for Idukki district and Dikulam Taluk. You can also compare them. This is for the purpose of seeing if they're correlated or not. And this is the proportion of land cover category. Proportion asking area of land cover for each land cover category, right? And we can compare them to check if the data is biased or not. We can check if the proportion of the SCD in different land use categories is correlated to the proportion of different species in different habitat categories, and we find that it is indeed correlated, which could mean bias. But we can go ahead and do another correlation to check if there is bias or not. That is the proportion of habitat category in each region in correlation to the proportion of sightings in different categories, which is the habitat categories. We find that all of them are 0.9 or close to that, and in some cases as close as 1. So we find that it is not correlated as we earlier thought it was. So the data is good to be used. Now we look at the elevation pattern. When we compare Idukki and Dikulam, we don't see much correlation. But we look at the species, we find that they are indeed correlated. So they started 1,200 and ended around 2,400 with higher at lower ends and higher end. Monsoon has more reach. And we can do another correlation, which is between elevations of SCD and elevation of species sighting. We find that only in Dikulam we find a significant correlation between each species, but that is excluding less than or equal to 1,000 meters. So it is not much of a concern as of now. And we will start mapping. Mapping is very important for designing a study. We will check the proportion of sightings. Proportion is essentially the number of sightings of species divided by the total number of sightings in a sky island complex. So we have this region, bright red and yellow, which means that these are most of the sightings of the species found in that region. So in the case of frequency, if we have around 5 sightings in one cell, and the total number of sampling efforts in that cell is also 5, we'll get 100% frequency, but that doesn't mean that there is higher number of records in that area. So this is similarly for Solicola albumentis and frequency of that species. Now we look at the SCD map. It's very important because we can look at the areas and find out where the places where they have been surveyed but they didn't find the species, and we can look at the species where there are open overlaps, they co-occur together. We find that in addition to having a higher elevational range, Montesyncla fairbranchi has a higher extent, a larger extent compared to Solicola albumentis in terms of space as well. So we now will start doing the species distribution modeling. For that, we have to select the variables. I used 62 variables for jackknifing. Essentially removing and checking if it has any gain for the model. This is fairly complex to explain in the short period of time. So I'll just go ahead with the explanations. So there's a species again for checking if there are correlated variables which can eliminate or take one element out of it, variable out of it. Since it was two packed together, I also did Spearman correlation for several variables like 5, 8, 11, and 10 and 11, and just took one of them. So these 10 variables were found to be strongly affecting models. You can see the cultivate and manage vegetation and elevation, which is found in the occupancy modeling as well, was found to be affecting models. So this has strongest effects. Now we go on to the RCP. RCP is representative concentration pathway, which is designed, which is a trajectory of carbon dioxide concentration designed by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. RCP 45 means that the concentration of carbon dioxide decreases by 2045, and by 2100 the concentration carbon dioxide will be half that of 2050. So now we look at the current. So there are three SDMs that we'll be looking at in each classes. One is current, another one is 2041 to 2060, and another is 2061 to 2080. Now we look at Monte class Arabangi, you will see that there's a decline as well as the increase in fastness. So these are the suitability of conditions from 0 to 1. The red is the 1. Now we look at RCP 85. This is essentially a model where there is no decline, but the continuous increase in carbon dioxide concentration until the end of 21st century. This is more of an unrealistic scenario, and you can go through the. Now we look at the RCP 45 of Sholikov-Albuendis. Here also we find that there is a increase in fastness and towards the borders there's an increasing decline in habitat suitability. Now RCP 85 for Sholikov-Albuendis. Now we look at the Himalaya quail of Riccius superciliosa, which was last sighted around 1.5 centuries before, and was sighted for only a duration of 4 decades. And the study was done in Dehradun district in Nainital district, which is specifically in Nainital town and Mussoorie town. So we look at the Nainital and Dehradun. They were in literature always said to be found between the altitude of 1,600 to 2,400. And if you look at the areas which has been not been surveyed and areas which is under surveyed, you can see that a lot of places in the elevation range, potential elevation range, has not been surveyed. By the use of an additional layer, which is the land use cover, high resolution land use cover, this is around 30 meters of resolution, we can further increase the sampling. And these are open access data sourcing, and these are the maximum SDMs. The disadvantages of maximum SDMs is that there's a lower spatial resolution of environmental data because of the data that is collected from weather stations and all that, they are far away from each other. There's a lot of interpolation methods. The advantage is that they have a high predictive power with small samples. For example, 50 to 100 can do the trick. And in one case, they predicted and found species of the snake viper in Albania because of this. Citizen science data, there is a lot of spatial inaccuracy because people tend to report higher inaccuracy, like 30-kilometer birding would not be useful data. Then there is birding as already told, and gradient of expertise because there are different people with different expertise in sighting and identification. Then the structured survey is not as structured as the ones that we do in a study. The advantage is that it's low cost and involves people outside of academia and increases their interest and makes them aware of the endemic threatening species. And a larger area is covered because more people are involved. And obviously, we'll have a lower carbon footprint because a lot less traveling, but we can delegate the job to people who are living in that area. Yeah, I would like to thank all these people and institutions for their help. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was a really interesting talk. Thank you, Paul. There you are. That was a really interesting talk.
One second.
We're still waiting on questions. And I think people are slowly sending us something, but it might take a minute or so while you connect. Yeah, are you connected? All right, can we start with a question that I posted actually while we're waiting for other questions? Could you comment on the accuracy of your models at such small scales?
Yeah, the accuracy depends on the data. So for that, I have filtered it manually. I've been semi-automatically for each of the cells. For example, if I'm doing Maxent modeling, the environmental background layer would be the resolution of say 900 something meters. So
Okay.
I'll have to select each coordinate which falls within that cell. if you have a traveling distance. So the eBird has a lot of protocols. One is stationary, one is traveling, one is historic, another is pelagic and all that. For traveling, I use the distance as a radius, and if I'll check if the circle which uses the radius it falls within the cell. So that's a way to eliminate some coordinates and check for resolution.
Okay, all right. Thank you. We are still waiting for comments, and like in yesterday's session, it filled up while the next speaker was speaking. So maybe we can. Oh, there it is. Okay, so Anand Meherwade asks regarding Maxent, various models and data sets are used, each having its own advantages and ease of precision. How to use it as precisely as possible?
Okay, so first we'll have to start with the data itself. Each step will have a lot of verification and filtering. The data itself should be good, and the next stage would be selecting the environmental variable. For that, you have to have field knowledge, expertise, and as well as a thorough understanding of the subject through literature survey. These three things can actually help you with the environmental variable, and then use a lot of techniques like jackknifing, PCA, correlations, and all that to decide which variables are most fit for the models. The Maxent modeling itself has a function for jackknifing, so that's a useful thing. And as for the models, the interpretation, it depends on what kind of output we are getting. If we are using logistic, we'll get a different interpretation. If we are using the raw models, we'll get a different interpretation. So you have to have an understanding of how to interpret the data, how to interpret the models.
Okay, we have a question from Guru who asks if citizen science data addresses your specific scientific questions.
Yeah, actually it did. So I wanted to see if there will be a decline. My hypothesis was that there will be a decline of habitat suitability and occurrence of the species that I'm looking at during the course of time. So till 2018, I've done modeling till 2018. I found there's a lot of increase in patchiness, a lot of increase in range shift, and a general decline in the suitability. So this can actually help in conservation because we know which areas are going to be more affected, and so we can give it to the forest department and tell them that these areas should be conserved.
Okay.
These areas should be prioritized. Yeah.
Okay. So Garima Sharma asks about the unstructured nature of citizen science surveys. Can these be fixed or avoided by designing a survey that leaves little room for recording unnecessary details by citizens?
I didn't get the question.
I think she's asking if you designed a study, would you be like kind of fixing some of the problems that citizen science surveys come with?
Okay, so for this study, I used hybrid data. That is, I actually went to the field and then collected eBird data, not just eBird, but mostly eBird. Basically, aggregation of data from eBird, iNaturalist, IBP, and all that. But there were very few points in other. So in the study, we randomly selected the plots we were doing, and the plots were situated. Most of them were situated far away from the birding spots, the general birding spots. So these extra points actually increase the accuracy of the models by a high level.
Okay. All right. So we have quite a lot of questions coming in. So I'd like to ask you to please answer them on Slack. We'll just do one quick question from Prabhakar. Did the citizen science data contributors get to see your analysis, and do you engage with contributors?
So as of now, the publication is in pipeline. And actually wanted to do some more verification before publishing it because it's a very complex thing. Modeling is a very complex thing. I don't want to make a mistake in doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. So when it's there, I'll be sharing it with you.
Okay, great. We have a lot of questions coming in for you. So please make sure that you're on Slack and you engage with people today and in the following days.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.